Are muddy colors ruining your landscapes? Here's the secret. You need to discover your color mixes before you start your watercolor painting. In this video, I'll share my exact color finding process to paint this mountain scene. We'll tackle the sky, the distant mountain, the mid-range mountains, and the foreground, each with its own color strategy to prevent mud and create depth. So stick around, because by the end you'll know exactly which colors to mix and when, so your landscapes look crisp and professional. To start this mountain scene, I've simply drawn in the edges of the mountains as seen in the reference photo. What I want to think about is I'm going to create the sky, and while it's wet, I will paint this distant range. I'm hoping that it will blend into the sky a little bit, making a soft edge and increasing the atmospheric sense. Then I'll start to bring in a little bit of color into this middle range, and in the foreground range I'll make it even greener yet, but I still want it to be muted. I'm going to use some tube colors as listed in the materials at the beginning of the video. Today I'm going to use two greens, and these greens I use almost exclusively. I have other greens. I have a lot of other greens actually, but these I use over and over and over and over, and I use them in seascapes too. I find them very versatile. A beautiful color for a bluish but deep green is shadow green. That's here in my palette. The next color that's a beautiful color for these kinds of applications is called Undersea green, but I use it for foliage all the time. It's a little bit warmer color. It's not quite as dark as shadow green, but it still can give a sense of distance and depth. And then for when I want really bright greens, and again, this is just two greens, this is Serpentine Genuine in my palette. The reference photo has cirrus clouds in it, and so that's a pretty easy sky to do. To get a really wispy feel, I like to use this brush. This is a chip brush that I bought from Lowe's, and every time somebody sees it, they ask, "How did you get it so jagged?" The answer is, I took it out of the wrapper, meaning it comes this way. For getting wispy effects in clouds or foliage, it's wonderful. I love it. The colors I'm going to use in the sky will be cobalt blue and manganese blue hue. Before we start our painting, we need to know what colors we're going to use. So how do we prepare our color mix for our sky? Let's say I haven't painted very many skies, and I did already decide that I'm going to use cobalt blue and manganese blue hue, but how do I really know how they're going to interact with each other and on the paper? Well, one way is to test that. So I'm going to take a swatch of cobalt blue, and I'm going to drag that out. And if you haven't painted in a while or at all, this is a good way to become acquainted or reacquainted with your color. Now I'm going to take some manganese blue hue, and I'm going to swatch it, add a little water. It's a little too much, but that happens. And then I'm going to blend them. And that gives me an idea as to how they're going to interact with each other. And they're nice because you can still see through to the paper. And that's important in watercolor. What makes watercolor luminous is that the light goes through the pigment and bounces back off the paper. So that's why we call it transparent watercolor. There are semi-opaque and semi-transparent colors in watercolor, and you can use them, and I'll show you how you can use them, and I will show you the pitfalls, which I'm going to do right now. So how could we possibly get mud? Well, let's try that. So let's say I'm painting my sky and it's too dark. I've got a little bit of cobalt blue, a little bit of manganese blue hue that I've blended together, so that's good. And I say, oh, I want it to be lighter. So I'm going to add some white paint or white gouache. And what can happen is that you lose your transparency. It becomes opaque. And you can't see through to the paper. So that's mud. Here we have transparency, manganese blue hue for the lighter part of the sky and cobalt blue for the darker. And when they blend together, they work well together. The way to lighten your colors is to use water. If it's too dark, add water. Unlike other media, in watercolor, you're painting with water, and to lighten colors, you add water. First, I'm going to work on the sky using this chip brush. I've wet my brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to brush in water into some places where I think that I'd like to place the blue. And I'm going about it with a fairly light hand. You can probably hear the scratching. And that way I've got gaps where the clouds will be. I'm going to tilt this and see if there's any chance you can see a glisten. Okay. Now I'm going to dip the brush into my cobalt blue and my manganese blue hue. And I'm simply going to just touch into the wet paper and you can see it blend on its own. Now I wanted a little more cobalt on this side, as I explained. And a little more manganese blue hue down here towards the horizon. Here I'd like sort of a blend, and I'd like a little more manganese blue hue, and work it just a little bit more. So what I wanted is I wanted the paper to be wet next to this most distant mountain, and it is. For the gray mountains, meaning the mountains in the distance, I want them to be a bluish gray color. I have developed a special gray that I've been using lately. I started with Winsor Violet, which again is a very, very deep color. Very potent. It will get away from you quickly. Just be warned. And again, this is where practicing with your color helps. Now I'm going to add in some Indanthrone blue, which is going to cut back on that violet color. And I'm going to add a little bit more. So it's still a very, very, very blue color. If I were to take this and put it on the paper, it's blue with a violet tinge to it. Now I could thin that out, and that'd be okay. You know, imagine a little mountain, that color. That could be nice. But I've taken it a step further. What I first did is I developed it with Hansa Yellow Light. But recently I've been using a little bit of yellow ochre. So now I add that into this bluish purplish mix. And you can see how it lightens up and it becomes a little less blue. So that's pretty dark. Let me thin that out. So I'm just playing here. But you can see as I thin it out, here's a blue mountain, here is a gray mountain. How could you possibly get mud at this stage? Let me use my gray again. I say, oh, it's too dark. I'm going to add some white. So it's pretty thin, but if you can imagine, I'm going to work directly with Indanthrone blue on the paper, Winsor Violet, a touch of yellow ochre, and some white. And this is the risk you run. So it's so thick, pretty much can't see the paper. Now let's see if I can lighten my color just with water. Yeah, that's how you prevent mud. Now I'm going to come along this line And I'm going to touch the sky sometimes, and I'm not going to touch the sky sometimes. And what that does is it causes a blending in some cases and a crisp edge in others. I'm blending the bottom of the mountain with clean water to fade it out so there isn't a hard line. If the section you're painting is starting to dry, you want to go back over all of it. And then that way you won't get a blossom, unless you want a blossom. While the painting is drying, I'm going to play with some greens for the mid-range mountains. I'm starting with some shadow green, and I'm not putting on very dark because I know I don't want it very dark. But that's more green than I want. I still want there to be a blue look, so I'm going to play with some cobalt blue and see what that color looks like. And I kind of like that. So if you notice in the reference photo, the mountains are under some clouds, and some of the mountains look sort of like a dark blue-gray, and some of them look like a warmer green. So to achieve that, I'm going to use some undersea green. Isn't that a pretty color? So I like that combination of shadow green, and I'm just going to put some cobalt blue directly on top of it. And if I wanted it to be a little more violet, I could take some of this gray, which is on the purple side. In fact, it's starting to separate in my palette. Let's just try that since we're practicing. Yeah, that helps. So how could we risk getting mud? Well, let's try that out. Some shadow green. Some cobalt blue. I'll add in some undersea green because I know where I'm going to do that. It's already drawing. What if I use some yellow ochre because it's fairly opaque? Maybe that's okay? I'm not sure. Let me add in some cobalt blue. I'm going to try some periwinkle because I want it to be lighter. It's not a lot lighter, and it sure is getting opaque. I've lost my green color. What am I going to do? Let's see. I can add some green gold. Still sort of opaque. Now, of course, the obvious answer is shadow green, cobalt blue, undersea green, and white. And boy, do you lose your transparency. I'll be using shadow green and undersea green predominantly for the mountains. I'll also add in cobalt blue and the special gray as needed to keep the mountains a cool color. Now this is all starting to dry, so I have a spray bottle handy to re-wet it, and that gives me a little more working time. Now I'm going to mix the two colors together, the shadow green and cobalt. Here, this is undersea green. I'm alternating between shadow green and my special gray. I'm taking a little more shadow green. I'm going to add some Winsor violet into that. I'm working wet into wet. So this is pretty dark. You can see what I'm doing here. This front mountain actually is in more shadow than the distant mountains. And sometimes it doesn't go the way I plan, but I like what it's doing. And that's what I can say today. I like what it's doing. I'm going to bring some of that violet color into here just to see if I can't get a little bit of unification of the colors. I'm just going to drop in some straight cobalt blue. Hopefully I won't regret that. This is just clear water I'm brushing on. I could suggest the shape of the pine trees by just dropping in some clean water. Or I could lift a little bit. It's not really lifting, is it? Just trying to suggest the conical shape of a pine tree. I really did want the foreground mountain to look more distinct from the background mountain. So I'm going to lift a little bit from here, and I think that's good for you to see, because lifting is not only good for where I think I've made a mistake and I want to change it, it also can be part of your plan. And what I mean by that is lifting is a bona fide technique. I've seen painters plan a painting where they put color down with the idea that they're going to lift up portions, whether it's a large portion or streaks, single lines, to complete the painting. So there's no reason to feel bad about it if it's something you feel like you need to do. Lifting works better with non-staining paints. You can find out which pigments are staining by looking them up on the manufacturer's website. I like this Royal Langnickel brush because the bristles are made of Golden Taklon, which is a synthetic brush, meaning they're a little stiffer and you can get more efficient lifting. I'm now going to work on the foreground, which has much lighter greens, and I will work from light to dark. All right, now it's time to use green gold, and just to give you a quick idea of what that's like, I'm swatching it here. Now I'm going to add a little yellow ochre. Here's Serpentine Genuine. It's pretty similar, but it doesn't, see how the green gold gets so yellow so easily? Serpentine Genuine doesn't do that. But what it does do that's so cool is it granulates, and you can actually see it's starting to granulate. Actually, let me zoom in on that. So green gold, I love. It's gorgeous. It can lighten to yellow. Serpentine Genuine is a granulating color. What can happen is if you work with it fairly wet, you'll start to see flecks of a warm brown, a lot like burnt sienna. So it's a gorgeous color. Now, to be clear, what would we do to prevent mud? So, like I showed you, I was working with the green gold and showing how it pulls out to yellow. And then I added a little bit of yellow ochre, thin, thin, and it blends nicely. If I add it thick, it might work. Let me add it thick there. It's starting to lose its transparency. Let me combine green gold with Serpentine Genuine. And then if I want a little yellow, add in a little bit of yellow ochre, and I think that'll work. That'll avoid mud. You could potentially get mud if you were to use periwinkle, which I'm going to use to do some distant flowers. Let me add my Serpentine Genuine, and I'm going to add this periwinkle. See how you can hardly see through the paper? And you'll see later on I'm going to use it for spattering. So that's how you get mud with these colors. Or you can add white. Okay, I'm going to start putting the color down wet on dry, and then I'm going to come back with different colors because in the reference photo you can see some rust colors and some golden colors and some deep orange colors. And that's what I want to start to bring out. As I'm applying the green gold, I'm thinking, oh, I should have left some gaps in the bottom of that mountain so that you can see it because green gold is transparent. So I'm going to do some lifting, pull that dark color out, again using my Royal Langnickel to help me out. You can see with the lifting, I've been able to reestablish the uphill angle towards the right. Now I'm adding some Serpentine Genuine, which will work great with the green gold and help develop some texture. I'm scrubbing this part out with the Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. See how the Serpentine Genuine is starting to granulate? You see those little specks of what looks like burnt sienna? This is from Serpentine Genuine. It's amazing. I love this color. It just like helps watercolor automatically paint itself. It's amazing. So I need to put some of that Serpentine Genuine elsewhere so I can get some of those colors because those are very fall-like colors. I've been thinking about mountains like these recently because I took a trip to North Carolina not too long ago and took a cajillion photos, mostly from the car, because we spent so much time getting there. I-40 is out right now due to landslides. And if you have had to deal with I-40 West, it can be a challenging drive. You will know what I'm talking about. Need to go back in with more green gold. Getting a little crazy here. I'll tell you what, I'm missing an opportunity. I'm missing an opportunity to use the chip brush. Okay, let's do it. And I can load my brush up with both greens. Just go crazy. And I'll come back with other colors. Look at that. Look at how fast I can go over this paper with this. Now I'm getting a little dry brush going on in here. And that's okay. And you'll get bristles because these are cheap. They used to be $1.28. That was fall of 2024. Now it's July, well, almost July, 2025. They are 20 cents more. Yep, folks, there was a price increase on my cheap chip brush. Now it's time to put in all the beautiful foreground colors. I'm going back and forth between Perylene Maroon and Burnt Sienna. And as the paper's starting to dry and I'm dropping in some more pigment, then you'll start to see some backwashes form which will add to the texture. Shadow green and undersea green on my brush. And I'm starting to establish some of the darks while it's wet. And so it'll be very soft. And then I can come back with more definitive shapes later. Right now I'm working wet into wet. Later on, I'll work wet on dry, and you'll see the difference. I know I said earlier I was going to work light to dark, but Hansa yellow light is semi-transparent and you can put it on top of dark colors and you can see it. Right now I'm working wet into wet, but later on I'll probably use it wet on dry because I can get these just gorgeous effects with it. This color I'm using for the suggestion of purple flowers. It's going to go into the mountains too, I can tell. This is Periwinkle. It is an American Journey color made through Cheap Joe's, which now no longer exists. Da Vinci was the company that made these colors for Cheap Joe's, and so what you can do is you can go and if you have a color that you can no longer get through Cheap Joe's, you can go to the Da Vinci website and see what the color code is and try to reproduce it. But when I found out they were going out of business, I stocked up. Now what I should have done is I should have covered this. I might turn those into birds later. I'm mixing up some shadow green for the trees in the foreground. This is an Escoda Optimo liner, size 14. It's very expensive, but there are alternatives. I've laid down the shadow green, and now I'm going to go back and I'm going to drop in some green gold to lighten up those tree limbs. This is a mixture of shadow green and undersea green that I'm mixing directly on the paper. Here's the final painting where I spattered in some white paint to suggest Queen Anne's lace. I felt like the foreground needed a little bit more interest, and I also added some highlights onto the two largest pine trees using Hansa yellow light.